Well, good evening. Good evening, and welcome to our first official Braver Angels debate. It is our second debate. We did cancel culture in May, and I think many of you were there for that cancel culture debate that we did. But we are, now that we're kind of officially joining Braver Angels, this is kind of our first debate as a part of Braver Angels, as an official Braver Angels community partner. So thank you for coming. We've spent a lot of time mulling over this, and I think the topic kind of came out of the recent violence that was experienced in numerous schools and locations around the United States, and the concerns that those acts of violence caused. So it made this topic front of mind, and as we're thinking about topics to do these debates on, of course, you want to do something that's culturally relevant. By the way, I'd introduce myself. I think most of you know me, but my name is Joel Allen. I'm a professor of religion and philosophy here, and also the director of the McGovern Center. It's great to have Luke with us again. Luke Phillips did a great job moderating our last debate. It was a lot of fun to get to know Luke, and then a few of us took Luke out to dinner this evening, and really enjoyed getting to know Luke. He's an unusual guy. His mind is like going all the time. Sometimes it's exhausting, but
sorry.
Very interesting guy. I don't know if I've ever met someone that's like mind running as quickly as Luke. So, but it's a pleasure. I've really enjoyed getting to know you, Luke. So, just a little heads up. On November 8th, we're going to be bringing Don Hedrick to campus. Don is the chief of police at Rapid City and also a graduate of Dakota Wesleyan. And he's a fascinating story about graduating and driving. Anyway, I'll let you tell his own story. But so it will be on the challenges and potentials for policing in America. He's a very innovative thinker. And so he'll be doing an 11 o'clock talk to students and then a 7 o'clock talk for the community. So Don Hedrick, November 8th. So make a mental note there. So great to have Luke come out. Luke, do you live in D.C.?
Yes.
In D.C. area? So I've been telling people we've been flying a moderator out from D.C. I was thinking that was correct. So Luke is going to come now and lead us in this conversation. It's not really a debate. It's more of kind of a critical, structured conversation. But it's a lot of fun the way Luke does it. And so come and lead us in this conversation, Luke. Thank you for being here.
Joel, thank you for the invite back, and on behalf of Braver Angels as an organization and a national community, it is really, really great to be working with you folks here at Dakota Wesleyan, formerly nowadays, and I look forward to seeing how that goes further on. So hi everyone, my name's Luke Nathan Phillips. I work for Braver Angels, the nation's largest fully red-blue, grassroots-led civic organization dedicated to helping Americans find the value in each other across all their divides, but most importantly and especially across the red-blue partisan, cultural, ideological divide that is the defining feature of our experience of politics in the 2020s, and something that reaches out and touches all of us at some personal and public level that we just got to figure out ways to deal with. And we have thought for quite some time that one of the best ways to do that is to practice skills of listening to each other, understanding ourselves, mediated through things like family therapy and parliamentary procedure that can help us have a healthier relationship with important political issues in this great project of American democracy. Braver Angels does that with a variety of partners, and we're very proud to be doing that with the McGovern Center and Dakota Wesleyan University communities more broadly here as well. So thank you all for inviting me back. It's great to be back out in the former Dakota territory where so many great Americans have had their starts, and where so many great Americans continue to live their lives. So I'm excited to be back here with you guys. I see there are a declining number of chairs, so as folks come into the room, feel free to grab chairs out there, and we will just feel free to hop in as we go in. So, okay, so we are doing a Braver Angels debate tonight. A Braver Angels debate is is I think the best way I like to describe it is it's a Socratic seminar moderated by a light form of parliamentary procedure. It's a debate, and it is a debate inasmuch as the point here is not consensus. The point here is not merely to open up new understandings, although those two things, when they happen, those are great. The point here at some level is to bring out the very disparate disagreements and differences in understanding on key issues that affect all of us in ways that are open for conflict in a productive and structured way. And so we call it a Braver Angels debate because we are open to the fact that there are irresolvable divides, irreconcilable differences that don't necessarily have to make us enemies, but can perhaps in some ways make us better friends and better citizens if we approach them right. And so the reason why the parliamentary procedure aspect of the Braver Angels debate is central is because, as we all know from social media and our wonderful addictions to Twitter and everything like that. If you don't structure conversation, if you don't structure disagreement, it can become very unproductive very quickly. And we hope to have very productive disagreement and dissension in this particular format. So I will tell you all the rules of the debate in just 1 second. But let me give you a quick run through of what's going to happen this evening, and then we will go ahead and get started. So we have a couple opening speakers set up. After our couple of brave and enterprising opening speakers, the floor will be open to everybody else to participate over the course of this debate. If you have any opinions at all on this subject, and I can't imagine how anyone could possibly have any opinions at all on this subject, if you have any opinions at all, regardless of whether you've prepared, regardless of how far out your views seem to you, regardless of how smart you think you are or how not smart you think you are, your voice is welcome. Your voice is important. Your voice is here. And that can be something that is highly logical and structured with facts and evidence. That can be something that's highly intuitive and reasoned from an internal point of view. That can be something that's based on experience. That can be something just based on your personal questions about something that you might want people to help you think through. The general philosophy of the Braver Angels debates is that every way of understanding issues, every way of understanding the world can help us all come to a better understanding of these kinds of issues here. And we try to be a microcosm of the best possible American public discourse in which there's many different ways of understanding things and many different perspectives on those things. And if we all come to the broader public discourse with the right spirit and agree to hold ourselves to the right rules, there is no limit to what we can learn about each other, about ourselves, and about these issues in our great democracy. So we will go through hopefully 6 to 8 to 10 to 12, maybe more speeches, depending on how talkative this room is. There will be time for questions after each speech. It will go between affirmative and negative speeches on the resolution. I'll read the resolution in just a second here. And at the end of that, we won't take a vote. We will do a debrief session. And in the debrief session, we will talk about things we learned and possibly talk about what we are going to take out of this room as we go approach this issue. So yes, that's the basic situation tonight. I should have you guys out here by about 8:30 or 8:45 p.m., unless you're really, really talkative, which is the best possible problem to have. But we'll see. Okay, let me tell you the rules real quick. So the most important format rule of the Braver Angels debate is you'll stand in the middle while you're giving a speech, and then you will address me as Mr. Chair. You will not address any individuals. I guess you can theoretically address the body as a whole, but do not talk specifically to anybody else in the course of this debate. Focus your arguments, focus your vitriolic personal attacks towards me, not towards anybody else. The reason we do that is to keep the focus on the broader debate as a whole rather than on what could become uncharitable personal attacks that tend to be the way that we all inevitably are sometimes tempted. And so by being your sacrificial lamb and taking all the personal attacks unto myself, I am helping you all at my own expense to have it. Anyways, address me as Mr. Chair. When you rise to ask a question of a speech that has been given, and it will be a question of clarification, I promise you any comment that you have to make about somebody's speech can be spoken in the form of a question of clarification simply by saying, and what do you think of that at the end of it? So ask questions, when you ask questions to speakers, ask them to me, not to the speaker, and then the speaker will have the chance to reply to you. It sounds clunky, it sounds kind of over-directed and whatever. I promise you it works. The reason it works is because we want to keep the focus on the issues and on the procedure here. So, that's thing number one, always address to the chair. Always refer to other speakers in the third person pronouns, so he, she, they, the gentleman, the lady, the person, the speaker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Do not use the second person pronoun you when referring to anybody except me, or I suppose a vague abstract you that doesn't refer to anybody in particular. It might break the fourth wall and be the listeners on the camera, but whatever. So refer to people in the third person pronoun, not the second person pronoun. We will go through alternating affirmative speeches and negative speeches. And when you give an affirmative speech or a negative speech, that doesn't imply any specific opinions you have about the resolution. We really just structure it in affirmative and negative to be the broadest possible kind of things. You don't even have to be particularly strong in the affirmative or strong in the negative on it. We just do that to make sure that there's some alternation in the flow of the conversation. And please feel free to respond to previous speeches and also to ask questions to the audience that you want to have answered in forthcoming speeches. That way it will open up more of this kind of discourse, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So let me think. Oh, one of the important rules too. Please do not clap, because clapping makes a sharp sound that tends to drown out lots of discussion that could be happening. Instead, and I tried this earlier and I know it works, so if you're sitting cross-legged, you should have like a little open spot on your chair where the blue thing is there. If you hit that, then it will make a pretty bassy sound that's not sharp. That's what we call banging in parliamentary procedure, and you do banging when you hear something that you find interesting, hear something you enjoy, or just generally want to express support to a speaker. So pretend I'm a really charismatic, charming, interesting, attractive young man who just flew out from Washington, D.C., and you wish I could be here for quite some time, and I just wowed your minds with how witty and charming and admirable I am. What are you going to do? Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll be here all night. So feel free to use banging liberally as your fellow speakers are up there. It can feel really nice to get that support. So, do that. And then let me tell you the culture rules as well, too. Everybody in the context of the Braver Angels debate is equal except me. I am the sovereign embodiment of Braver Angels debate chairing rules, and I govern with an iron fist over the course of this. And so in comparison to me, you all are equals underneath the Braver Angels debate rules, and so all your relationships outside of the context of the Braver Angels debate, and that's especially important with the professor to student relationship, do not feel any particular need to govern what you say based on like prudence or deference or whatever. Just say what you believe, because we really do think that at the level of public discourse, everybody's contributions should be equally considered in the field of public debate, and more broadly in the field of public discourse, but that's another theoretical question for further along. There's two culture rules. The first one is say what you believe. The second one is be as, and this is just an extension of that first rule, be as passionate, as nuanced, as unsure, as certain, as awkward, or as eloquent as you actually are, And I promise you, as long as you follow the procedure rules and come with the general spirit of inquiry and goodwill towards your fellow members of this debate, whatever you say will be of value for this conversation, and we will all walk away with a little bit more of an understanding of what's happening here. So I think that's the majority of the structural things. I will say, just as a preliminary thing, I understand there was a situation that happened both on Dakota Wesleyan campus earlier today. Oh, at the high schools around here, and in high schools in other parts of the country as well, where the issue of gun violence and gun control and mass shootings came to a, fortunately, just theoretical approach, but it still kind of highlighted the fact that guns, people owning guns, people misusing guns, people's rights to guns, people abusing guns, all that kind of stuff are something that is very much not only present in public life, but reaches down and hits people's personal lives, even in the little quiet town of Mitchell, South Dakota. And so we at Braver Angels only discuss hard issues. They wouldn't be issues if they weren't hard to discuss. So as we're going into this, I just want everybody to know that it's whatever your backgrounds are on this, whatever your thoughts are on this, please just be as frank, earnest, open as possible. And I think that will be exactly what this debate needs. So additionally, whoever is the guardian of these two delightful younger individuals in the back, I want you to know that they're welcome to speak too when they have thoughts there. So let me read the resolution real quick, and then we will go ahead and get started without further ado. So the resolution on the table tonight is resolved: greater restrictions on guns, such as a ban on assault-style weapons, would save lives and not impinge on Second Amendment freedoms. Resolved, greater restrictions on guns, such as a ban on assault-style weapons, would save lives and not impinge on Second Amendment freedoms. If you're in the affirmative on the resolution, you generally agree with it more than you disagree with it. If you're in the negative on the resolution, you generally disagree with it more than you agree with it. If you're not sure, if you're very nuanced, just pick one of those sides and I'll still call on you and you should say what you believe. We'll go through as much of that as we can, and then we'll go for it. Also, you might notice this is a very complex resolution with a lot of clauses. Feel free to interpret it however you please and address whichever of the clauses and whichever of the other speeches you think are the ones that you would like to address. So, are there any questions before we get started tonight? Okay, one last point of procedure, because this is being filmed for record-keeping purposes, for the use, I understand, of Dakota Wesleyan, we do need to have at least the speakers use their microphones. I think questioners just speak loudly, but the speakers, you will need to use the microphones. So Joel will give you the microphone once you're called on to speak, and if you can hold it about a foot away from your face, that will pick up the majority of your words. So yeah, all right, well with that, I would like to call this debate to order. The resolution on the table is resolved: greater restrictions on guns, such as a ban on assault-style weapons, would save lives and not impinge on Second Amendment freedoms. I am looking for a speech in the affirmative. The lady in the skeleton.
All right.
You have 4 to 6 minutes.
Okay. Mr. Chair, can I write the Second Amendment on the board right there?
Yes, that is in order. Feel free to. If everybody could look around to this, yes. Madam Speaker, if it's helpful, you can start giving your speech and I can write the Second Amendment on the board.
Okay, that's the start of my speech, so sorry.
Everybody, you will not be expected to write the Second Amendment on the board as the price of your initiating your speech. If you do, I will not rule it out of order, though. Extra points to anybody who writes it in Morse code as well, too. All right, Madam Speaker, I am starting your time right about now. And please return to the floor.
All right. So a well-regulated militia being necessary to the city. Come back here. Okay. I was going to write on the board still. That's okay. I can point. Okay. So the Second Amendment reads as follows: a well-regulated militia, comma, being necessary to the security of a free state, comma, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, comma, shall not be infringed. As an English major, I understand the right of the people to keep and bear arms, as it is enclosed by commas, to be dependent on the subject of this sentence, a well-regulated militia. Folks are allowed to bear arms, but only for the sake of creating a well-regulated militia that can fight to protect our country. However, the Constitution was ratified in 1791, which is 231 years ago. A lot has changed since then. In 1791, the American colonies were less than 10 years out of the Revolutionary War. We can see the issues they faced during the war reflected in the Third Amendment. No soldier shall, in the time of peace, be quartered in any house without the consent of the owner, nor in time of war, but in a manner to be prescribed by law. When was the last time you feared a soldier would come to live in your house without your consent? In today's world, that sounds ridiculous, but according to constitutioncenter.org, during the 1700s, quartering soldiers was a hot-button issue. The colonies did not want to raise funds to house British soldiers, especially during the time of peace after the French and Indian War. If the Third Amendment was so heavily influenced by the culture of the time, how can we say that the Second Amendment is not also a product of its time? Let's look back at the wording of the Second Amendment. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state. A militia, as defined by the Oxford English Dictionary, is a military force that is raised from the civil population to supplement a regular army in an emergency. Therefore, the Second Amendment says that a civilian army is necessary for the protection of the free state. Historically, this idea makes sense. The colonists had just fought an entire war with a civilian army. They did not have a national army, nor did they have an organized police force, which again does not translate to modern times. We have both of those things. Members of our communities are part of the government-regulated armed forces and law enforcement. We have advanced beyond the need for a civilian-run militia to protect our country. I also understand taking measures to protect yourself from violence, especially as a woman. However, that is not what is happening with assault-style weapons. According to NPR, the Uvalde shooting, the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting, the Las Vegas shooting, the Sutherland Springs, Texas shooting, the Pulse nightclub shooting, the San Bernardino, California shooting, and the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting all involved AR-15 style weapons. Across those 7 mass shootings, 213 people were murdered. 213 people. Were these shooters the well-regulated militia fighting for the security of the free state the Constitution allows? No, they were murderers. They killed children, they killed churchgoers, and they killed people trying to have a good time. Maybe that's not what you're going to do with an assault weapon. I mean, that's not what I would do either. But if I can do something, like not buying a weapon that somebody could steal out of my house or out of my car to use on any of the schools that I live next to, I feel like it's my duty to do it. I don't think an style weapon ban would fix all our issues, and I don't expect it to. But if there's a sliver of a chance, no matter how small, that the world could be a little bit safer for our kiddos, I think we should move forward with it.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Stay in the middle, stay in the middle. Thank you for your excellent opening speech. Much appreciated. And thank you for reminding us all the specific text of the Second Amendment as well,
Yes.
too. That's a helpful reference here. We have time for questions for the speaker. If you have a question for the speaker, please raise your hand. Do we have questions for the speaker? I see a question here. Please stand to ask your question.
Yes, I'd like to ask.
Please stand. Please stand. And please ask your question to me about the speaker in the third person. Ask your question to me.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the speaker if she would be opposed to someone owning an AR-15 clone because they have a need for one, such as down in the South, they have problems with wild boars, and sometimes they have large herds of them, and they want to kill as many of them as possible, as quickly as possible. I'm wondering if the speaker would be opposed. If there's a demonstrated need
Okay, yep. Sir, do you mind asking, could you get us a third microphone by chance? Is that possible? Thank you. Just for the audio, ask the question again, please.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to, or Mr. Chair, I'd like to ask the speaker if she would be opposed to allowing someone who has a demonstrated need to purchase an AR-15 clone to do so if they had a reason, like they had a problem with wild boars on their ranch, and they needed to be able to shoot as many wild boars in a herd, in a short period of time.
Thank you, sir. Please remain standing. Madam Speaker, you can answer however you like.
I guess I don't know, Mr. Chair, I don't know a lot about wild boar hunting, unfortunately, but I guess I would like to see proof, I guess, that that's the only way that you could hunt wild boars, and also we don't have wild boars in South Dakota, so I think that kind of depends on geographic location, and I think that's a deeper nuance than just the nation as a whole.
Thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Questioner. Do we have another question for the speaker? Other questions for the speaker? I have a question. Does the speaker believe that laws can only be interpreted in the social context of the times in which they were written, or does she believe that there's anything enduring and permanent to the laws beyond their social context and interpretation?
I think you have to interpret them as both. You have to understand the time periods where it's coming from, but also universal themes, because I think of a lot when I study literature, we are looking at it, how it affects and influences times today, but we also have to understand what was going on at the time, because that heavily influences how you word things, how you write things, what the writer's implicit biases are too.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. Thank you very much for a fantastic opening speech. Much appreciated here. All right, after that first speech in the affirmative, I'm looking for a first speech in the negative. I see the gentleman who is a wrestling coach.
I have a question for Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
When you ask a question, do you have to say, Mr. Chair, I'm asking a question?
You can just ask.
When you are asking a question, do you have to say to yourself?
Okay, so this has been a long topic of debate inside the Braver Angels debate team, and there's many opinions on it among those of us who chair. I hold myself to the practice of referring to the speakers in the third person directly, although it's true I do not ask myself, Mr. Chair. I talk to myself enough already. So, Mr. Speaker, you have 4 to 6 minutes.
Thank you. So let's all give a bang for teachers, to parent-teacher conferences tonight. That's why you were all graced with the presence of these two little people. So focus on them, and then my argument doesn't seem so weak. So let me just start by saying that I don't own a gun. I don't hunt. I would loosely call what fishing that I do fishing. So I'm very outside of this realm. And with that, let's see here. It's not something that I'm opposed to, and it's something that I would like to do. I would like to start hunting. I would like to own a gun at some point in time. Are you serious right now? Jesus. Okay. But the basis of it all is that.
Young ladies, I would like to call you to order.
Scarlet. Okay, let's see if we can get through this. All right. The thing about owning a gun for me is that I don't have any experience or education with them. Okay? Which is kind of my defense of in the pro, is that
You're doing great, and so is she.
Diane, stop. We'll figure this out. In our country, we have a lot of personal freedom, and it's really my belief that that freedom comes with a lot of personal responsibility. I do not own a gun because I don't have the knowledge and experience to safely load, unload, put away, secure. And that would be my responsibility to know how to do those things. Okay? And if you own a weapon, it's your responsibility to make sure that it is securely put away. Like I can't leave a gun just sitting in my car that could get broken into. If it gets broken into and taken, there is some responsibility on me for that because that's my gun and I did not secure it well enough. Okay? So really my belief is that I'm against this resolution because as a gun owner, you have to have that personal responsibility to maintain and secure those things. The analogy that I came up with is if you own a vehicle that is not properly maintained and you end up in an accident because of something that wasn't properly maintained, that accident is your fault. So you own responsibility for that. So if you own a gun and you don't properly unload it, you don't properly secure it, and something happens, then that gun gets taken or used for something, then there should be some responsibility that falls back on you as that owner. So if we had a greater personal responsibility by gun owners to ensure that security of weapons, then that would be a better deterrent than limiting people's ability to acquire a certain type of weapon. And that's it.
Great. And with that, the speaker is thanked, but please stay standing in the middle. Please raise your hand if you have a question for the speaker. I have a very quick question for the speaker. Mr. Speaker, are these your daughters?
Yes. This is Diana. She's 4. And this is Scarlett. She's almost 2.
Diana, Scarlett, very nice to meet you. Your father is a very brave and wise man. Listen to him all the time. So, all right, we have time for questions of clarification for the speaker on his speech. Do we have any questions? Questions for the speaker? Are there any questions? Yes, over here.
It's okay, Joel. You just take a load off. Mr. Chair, I'm curious if the speaker would be in favor of stronger regulations for gun owners themselves in terms of, such as with a vehicle owner requiring them to take a test, certain pieces in order to get a license, and other pieces that would sort of show their forward-thinking personal responsibility and that they have the maturity and of sound mind to do so.
Thank you for that. Please remain standing while he answers. Mr. Speaker, you can answer however you like.
almost included things of that into this, but I didn't know how long it needed to be. But I'm absolutely in favor of things like that. And even so far as to go, if you're drinking and driving and you kill someone, like, you can be taken to court for manslaughter. So if negligence can be found far enough that you could have done more to secure a weapon, there is a lot of responsibility on you, and I would also even be in favor of things like that.
Do we have any other questions for the speaker? Yes, sir. Please, Mr. Questions.
Mr. Chair, would you... Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, I would like to know if the speaker, what his thoughts are concerning mandatory sentencing for people who commit gun crimes.
Thank you. Please remain standing. Mr. Speaker?
I have no thoughts on that at the moment. I don't have enough experience with mandatory sentences to give a good opinion.
And with that, the speaker and his questioners are thanked. Thank you very much, all. Real quick, I want to point out that these first two speakers here have not only given us some excellent, thoughtful first opening speeches, but they've also responded to some questions saying, "I don't know." And I want you all to know that as the chair, I will smile upon the answer, "I don't know," for any response to something if you actually don't know about it, because the chair himself does not know a lot of things and is always pleased to see that he's not the only one who doesn't. So, yeah. So feel free to do that. Intellectual humility is great. Also, intellectual confidence is great too, but like you can have both at the same time. So, all right. With that, we are looking for a speech in the affirmative. I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. But was there... Okay, yes. In that case, let's go. Ma'am, you have 4 to 6 minutes.
I don't think I'll take 4 to 6 minutes. I will
Take
say
however long you like.
that I lose my ability to think after 7 p.m., so there may be a lack of clarity here. I am going to argue that greater gun control is required in order to keep people safe and often protect them from their own current state. And I do want to say I'm going to talk about suicide, and I understand that that can be difficult. So if you would like to get up and walk out, I don't know if that's appropriate.
That is in order. That is in order.
So please feel free to take care of yourself. But we have approximately 50,000 deaths to suicide in this country every year. Over 25,000 of those deaths are attributed to firearms. It's the most lethal form of suicide. And if you live in a home with a gun, you are, I think, you're at a threefold greater risk of dying by suicide than if you live in a home without a gun. And I'm going to step back and say I'm a gun owner. Some of you know this about me, right? I love to shoot. Give me a 12 gauge and I'm on it, but it's all skeet, you know. So I have guns in my house too. But I've seen situations where people have failed to protect people in psychiatric crisis who live in their homes from those guns. And they may be put away, they may be locked, bullets may be removed. And prior to deaths, I have had family members tell me when they have somebody at risk in their home, I'm not giving up my gun. My gun is my gun, and if my child dies by suicide using that gun, that's his choice. And I can promise you that after that death has happened, I hear something very, very different. And I think it's hard to anticipate the impact of what a suicide will be on a family until they've experienced it. And I think it's also hard to anticipate that they will use your weapon to kill themselves. We also know that if we restrict access to means of one particular kind, it's unlikely somebody is going to attempt using a different kind. So if I'm going to die by firearm, I am not going to die by hanging or jumping. And if we restrict access to that means, then we limit the opportunity entirely that somebody in psychiatric crisis is going to die. One more thing, I have not been watching my time, so stop me if I'm over.
You have plenty of time.
Excellent, thank you. We often think of a need to protect ourselves. Just for context, approximately 20,000 people die by homicide. Not all of those are firearm violence. So to what extent do we need a gun to protect ourselves, and are we the ones preventing a death of ourselves or our families by owning the gun? And that's a question I don't know. So I'm just putting that out there. All right, that's all I got.
And with that, the speaker is thanked for this wonderful impromptu speech. But stay in the middle. We have time for questions for the speaker. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Do we have any questions for the speaker? Question back here. And address it to me.
Mr. Chair, I'm curious if the speaker feels that on the specific topic of suicide, if that is more of a gun control issue or lack of psychiatric mental health resources in America, which is the greater cause, in her opinion.
Thank you for that excellent question. Stay standing. Madam Speaker, you can address that however you like.
I think that is an excellent question, and I'm going to say both. I'm going to say that if we were able to control even gun purchasing and guns in the home, then we're going to limit the number of suicides we see that are driven in large part by mental health issues. In fact, when we look at mass violence, and it's been brought up, this idea that mass violence has increased, those are primarily motivated, it's estimated at least a third are primarily motivated by suicidal ideation and suicidal intent. And so that is a mental health issue. We tend in our country to put those mental health issues on the individual and make them responsible for it. And so why then do I need to control guns if what we need to focus on is mental health? But I could also say that, I'm going to use an analogy here, that I am not required to wear a seatbelt because that is my choice. If I die, I die. There are a number of vehicular deaths related to lack of seatbelt use, and we do have laws in place to prevent that. So yes, you have a choice, but are you going to exercise the wiser one that protects you? So maybe not, so I'm going to put that law in place. And I would say that in terms of gun control, it's very similar. You may have mental health issues. You do not, and I can tell you in our country, you probably do not have access to the resources you need to regulate those. And ultimately, if you die by a firearm, we could say that is a mental health issue and gun control wouldn't have prevented it, but we do know regulating access does prevent it. And I'm going to share a story about somebody who purchased in our state a firearm, went home, thought about killing himself, returned the firearm, went back and bought it, and used it the next day to kill himself. He was in and out repeatedly. And if he had had time to separate himself from that and get the help he needed, probably wouldn't have happened. Gun control may have given him that time or better restrictions. And I don't know. I'm not a gun control expert, so I really can't say that I'm. Should I be addressing you since you asked me?
You may,
Okay.
So when you're answering questions, it's actually okay if you look at them, but
Okay.
speak to Mr. Chair. So.
All right, so
You're doing this right.
it's
You're
going
doing this all right.
backwards
Yes,
then.
yeah.
So in short, I'm not a gun control expert, but I think we need to look at both things because sometimes we don't provide the resources people need, and so at the same time we need to ensure that everybody stays safe.
The chair appreciates the speakers having made that note about different kinds of suicide attempts and the statistic on folks who attempt on one way, not always trying in different ways. I did not know that, but that's actually very interesting to know for all kinds of social policy reasons, so thank you for that. We have time for one more question. Please address your question to me.
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, Mr. Chairman. As far as the point that she made that people, if they're denied the means of committing suicide that they have fantasized about, they're less likely to choose another. However, if you remove guns entirely from the equation, then wouldn't you just change the dynamic? They would, instead of thinking about using their shotgun to kill themselves, they would instead, because that's not an option, they would instead focus their attention and their energy on maybe running into a pillar at 80 miles an hour on the interstate.
Thank you, Mr. Questioner. Please stay standing. Madam Speaker, you can answer however you like.
Not necessarily, because that's a lot scarier for people. And also when we consider that approximately 60% of suicides are caused by firearm, if we remove those, the other means are less fatal. And so there is an opportunity then to follow up on a more serious attempt by responding to a hanging potentially, carbon monoxide poisoning, or any other kind of poisoning, or any other kind. Well, I don't want to get into too many means here. Sorry about that. That was like really inappropriate. But yeah, so we would reduce the number of fatal attempts. So we're already going to bring down the suicide rate, and we know that that's going to happen. We see a difference between the number of females who die by suicide and the number of males who die by suicide, because most females don't use firearms in an attempt because it is a scary thing to do. And there's also a lot of disfiguration, and I hope that you're not familiar with what that looks like, because it is a tremendous amount of disfiguration. And so we tend not to see that.
And with that, the speaker and her questioners are thanked. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We're about to go to our second speech in the negative on this resolution, but I just want to take a point of chair's privilege to tell everyone in this room and everyone who eventually sees this video, if it is made public, that so suicide is a very important topic. We understand that is a triggering thing to think on, and it also is something that causes a lot of somberness and sobriety in those who think on it. If you ever have any ideations of suicide or self-harm, that is a very serious thing, and you should feel no shame at all whatsoever in getting help and in doing what you need to do to live a better life and be treated for that. So we at this spot endorse everybody getting the help that they need. So, but thank you, questioners and speakers, for having brought this into the conversation. All right, with that, we're going to go to our next speech in the negative on this resolution. I'm looking for a speaker in the negative. Sir, the gentleman in the plaid, you have 4 to 6 minutes.
All right, there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to try to go as fast as I can and try to address as much as I can. As far as the Second Amendment, I think Dave would be a better speaker on that, but I'll just quickly hit on a couple of things. The Supreme Court has ruled a couple of cases that are pertinent here. One is District of Columbia versus Heller, and what that did was it affirmed citizens have an individual right, unconnected to a well-regulated militia, to possess guns within their own homes. It's an important distinction. And then the newest one is New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin, that was just recently decided here in 2022. And what that did was it struck down a law in New York that prevented people from concealed carry of firearms. Justices specifically said that the Second Amendment protects the public carry of firearms, which was not the case before today. So the Supreme Court has ruled on it in very recent time as far as that goes. Like I said, Dave is a better one to really address this. I want to get back to the safety issue, and not specifically suicide, but in 2020, according to Pew Research, there was 13,620 murder and non-negligent deaths by firearm. Of those, 59% of gun deaths are by handgun. Only 3% are by assault-style weapon, which has never really been fully explained what an assault-style weapon is. And in fact, in a couple of debates, it was mentioned that anything that is a semi-automatic weapon is an assault-style weapon, which is pretty much every weapon on the market today. So I think that needs further clarification for it to be even a valid designation. However, only 3% of 16,000 people were killed by an assault-style weapon. So I think the issue is a little blown out of proportion, with all due respect to the people that have died because of mass shootings. And to that point, one of the major issues with mass shootings is that they all occur in the similar type of environment. According to Crime Prevention Research Center, 97.8% of all mass shootings between 1950 and 2018 occurred in gun-free zones. And there's a reason for that. I forgot to write down the quote, but it was a part of one of these maniacs' manifestos that said, don't attack hardened targets because you're more likely to die, live to fight another day, attack the weak. That's the mentality of these people that have serious mental illness and they need to be addressed. However, keeping people safe is not by removing guns. In fact, it's arming people, because in the 20 states that allow teachers to be armed, there have been no school shootings, as well as no accidents or injuries caused by firearms possessed by teachers. The answer is not removing guns. The answer is educating people on how to use them and then arming them and having hardened targets so that these cowards can actually go someplace else. That's what I got.
And with that, the speakers thank. Please stay in the middle, though. Thank you for your speech in the negative and for helping us start this debate, sir. We have time for questions for the speaker. Do we have a question for the speaker? Please raise your hand. I see a question over here. Please stand and address your question.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I would like to know what other factors may be present in the state that could potentially minimize shootings where they have not occurred. Is the only difference in those states gun possession on the part of teachers?
Thank you. Please stay standing. Mr. Speaker, you can address that however you like.
Depends. I really don't know. I wasn't able to dive deep enough into it to find other mitigating factors.
Thank you. We have time for another question for the speaker, and I just want to thank the speaker, by the way, for his note on almost all firearms on the market nowadays are semi-automatic. That's never actually clicked for me before, but it makes sense in terms of technology kinds of stuff, so thank you for that clarification. I saw a question over here. Please stand and address your question to me for the speaker.
I'd like to ask the speaker if he's aware of what the original first attempt at this process was, which was an assault weapons ban that Clinton put into place, the Congress put into place and ran for 10 years, and what the results of that particular thing were.
Thank you, sir. Please stay standing. Mr. Speaker, you may address that however you like.
No, I don't have that information either.
I didn't think so. You were too young.
Thank you. I'm not, but thank you.
Would you like to get a clarification or follow-up from the questioner, or actually, tell you what, the chair will look forward to a speech from the questioner on this further on in this debate. So thank you for this question. Do we have another question for the speaker? Do we have a last question for the speaker? Right over, let's go over here. Yes. Yeah. Please address your question to me.
Okay. Mr. Chair, what would those other places be? Like, if you're talking about arming teachers to then save schools, like, I guess my first thought would people would go for like daycares or something, because what daycare workers are gonna hold like close carry weapons. So I just wonder, like, where do you think they're gonna go?
Thank you for that question. Please remain standing. Mr. Speaker, you can address that however you like.
I think if you look at the people that have conducted this kind of violence before, they choose, it's terrorism is what it is. They do what they do, and they do it in such a way to incite fear and to stack bodies, the grossest way possible to imagine. That's what they're trying to do. So if you limit one avenue, they're going to find another avenue. So really what it ends up being is we need citizens to protect themselves. Because I don't know about you guys, but like where I live, I can't wait for a cop to come and save my family, because we'll all be dead and the guy will, or gal will have long gone before they can come out there.
And with that, the speaker and his questioners are thanked. Thank you all very much. All right, so we are going to keep going. I'm looking now for another speech in the affirmative, but before we get to that, I want to let everybody know that we have been through 4 speeches now, and there's already been a very good spectrum of views brought out both in the speeches and in the questions, and themes from public safety to personal responsibility to others, to personal rights to oneself, to questions of mental illness and social place and all this kind of thing have been brought up. And all of these and more are fair game for this resolution. If you have thoughts on this, if you have questions on this, you are more than welcome to make a speech, whatever your thoughts are on this. So we're going to get through as many more speeches as we can, but I just want to invite everybody who is interested in giving a speech tonight. The floor is open as we go. So, but with that, I'm looking for a speech in the affirmative. Do we have another speech in the affirmative? Sir, you have 4 to 6 minutes.
It's tough for academic, right? So my sense really is, to some degree, this is a question about what sort of society we want to live in. I'm not holding it far enough away. So some people, some of the former speakers have covered ground that I was going to cover, so you'll get a somewhat shorter speech, lucky you. Gun violence is really an epidemic in our country. In 2020, there were more than 45,000 recorded gun deaths in the United States. And that's the elimination of a city roughly the size of Texarkana, Arkansas, wiped out in a single year. This is the most on record. Per capita, this means that there were 13.6 gun deaths per 100,000 people in 2020. This isn't the highest rate on record. We actually hit that in 1974, which was quite a while ago. Notably, in 2020, firearm-related injuries surpassed motor vehicle accidents to become the leading cause of death among people 1 to 19 years of age in the United States. Gun deaths include both murders, which account for 43% of these deaths, and suicides, which account for 54% of these deaths. Of the gun murders, 59%, and likely more, were from a handgun, and only 4%, as a former speaker indicated, come from rifles or shotguns. The U.S. per capita gun death rate, which is an awkward phrase, is far above that of most other developed nations. Canada's rate is 2.1 gun deaths per 100,000. Australia's is 1 gun death per 100,000. France's is 2.7 gun deaths per 100,000. The United States gun death per capita rate compares favorably only with a number of Central and South American nations, such as El Salvador, with a rate of 39.2 gun deaths per 100,000, Venezuela with a rate of 38.7 per 100,000, Guatemala 32.3 per 100,000, and Colombia with 25.9 deaths per 100,000. It bears mention that the U.S. State Department advises against travel to any of those countries for, among some of the following reasons: violent crime, including robbery, homicide, and sexual assault throughout significant portions of these countries, civil unrest, kidnapping, the arrest and detention of U.S. citizens without due process or fair trial guarantees, terrorism, and wrongful detention. While the right likes to rail about violent crime in America's cities, particularly during election season, the reality is that on a per capita basis, the most violent states and counties in the U.S. are rural states and rural counties, which consistently boast the highest per capita rate of gun death and violence. Anyone guess which state boasts the highest per capita gun death rate in the nation? Mississippi. Mississippi, 28.6 per 100,000, eclipsing Colombia's rate and closing in on Guatemala's. Our neighbor to the west, Wyoming, comes in second with a 25.9 gun deaths per 100,000, the same as Colombia's. Other states in the top 7 include Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Kentucky, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, Montana, and New Mexico. Of these 11, 9 are fully controlled by Republicans, right? 2 houses controlled by Republicans and the governorship controlled by Republicans. 1 is split government, that's Kentucky, and 1 is Democratic, that's New Mexico. We find the same patterns when we move to the county level. A study reviewing per capita rates of homicides between 2016 and 2020 found that 13 of the 20 counties boasting the highest rates of gun homicides per capita were rural counties. Phillips County, Arkansas, with a population of 20,000, and Lowndes County, Alabama, with a population of 10,000, topped the list and outpaced St. Louis and Baltimore in deaths by gun. On Liberty, John Stuart Mill articulated the harm principle as follows: the only purpose for which power can be rightfully exercised over any member of a civilized community against his will is to prevent harm to others.
Mr. Speaker, you have about a minute and a half.
Okay. I got to cut to the chase. Unfortunately, we continue to frame guns as an issue of individual rights rather than one of public health. The Center for Gun Violence Solutions argues that we need to pursue both supply-side and demand-side solutions. We'll focus on supply-side right now. They suggest purchaser licensing or permit to purchase, which requires that someone who wants to purchase a firearm obtain a license prior to purchasing it. This has empirically demonstrated decreases in gun deaths. Another thing they advocate for is firearm removal for domestic violence protection orders and risk protection orders, which has also empirically been shown to lessen the incidence of gun violence. So I go back, I think simply in terms of social contract theory, this is about what sort of society we want to live in. I am not amenable to an earlier speaker's notion that we should arm everyone, because that's not the sort of society I would prefer to live in. I think as part of a civilized nation, we give up some of our freedoms to enjoy a certain style of life, right? This is social contract theory all the way back to Hobbes, right? And so I think when we're talking about limiting gun rights, it's about sacrificing some individual freedom for the greater good and for living in a society that we want to live in.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Oh, was there a final part? Or?
No. Okay.
Oh, great. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All right, we have time for questions for the speaker. I see a question for the speaker here. Please stand, address your question to me.
Mr. Chair, I would like to ask the speaker of the countries mentioned that have a comparable rate to gun death in the United States, of those countries, what is the rate of gun ownership and legalization for their citizens compared to the United States?
Excellent question. Please stay standing. Mr. Speaker?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Great. The chair will smile upon anybody who is able to give a speech with answers to that and other questions that have been answered, because the chair is just actually curious about all this too. So please help me with my research, everybody. All right. Do we have other questions for the speaker? Another question for the speaker? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I am wondering if the speaker is aware that when you have 18 deaths within 2-mile circle in Jackson, Mississippi, whether or not that's considered rural.
Thank you, Mr. Questioner. Please stay standing. Mr. Speaker, you can answer that however you like.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
For a follow-up?
You said it happened. The speaker said that the rural state like Mississippi, which has the highest crime rate, I'm wondering if he considers rural to be Jackson, Mississippi, where they had 18 gun deaths within a 2-mile circle in Jackson, Mississippi.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, the notion of cities in rural states and to what degree that distorts the statistics of it being rural versus being urban.
From what I'm reading about county-level evidence, I didn't get down to looking at population density. So that's really the question, right? And I can't answer that in that regard. All I know is that the counties that I was looking at are classified as rural. There's some variation there, but it's a population density index at some level, if that makes sense.
Thank you. The chair will smile upon further speeches on this regard over the course of the speech, too. Do we have other questions for the speaker? Other questions for the speaker? Yes, sir.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering if the speaker knows if there's a higher percentage of mass shooters that come from broken families, that just single-parent families that maybe don't have a father figure who has taken them out hunting and fishing, and if that...
The speaker doesn't know that.
So, yes, well, thank you for this question. It brings some very important sociological things into this, which is important, and thank you for this question of clarification, too, here. Yes, the chair smiles upon speeches that respond to speeches that had previously been made, so long as you refer to other speakers in the third person, not in the second person. So the speaker with the wonderful bow tie might be a third person way to refer to him. I'll take one more question for the speaker, and then we'll move on from here. So please address your question to me.
Mr. Chair, I would ask if the speaker has any idea what the reasons are that some of the countries he mentions, France, et cetera, that have lower per capita gun violence rates than we do. Is there any speculation or evidence on what are the factors that are contributing to their being lower than us, despite our being typically classified as similar countries in the OECD or whatever?
Thank you very much. Please remain standing. Please remain standing. Mr. Speaker, you may address that
They have much
however
more
you like.
restrictive gun laws, essentially, right? It's much more difficult. You have to go through longer processes to get a gun, right? There are not nearly as many guns per capita in those countries. I mean, at some level, it's a simple question of how many guns are out there.
And with that, the speaker and his questioners are thanked. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this speech.
Mr. Chair, may I clarify something? So
What's your question?
my question was not, can I respond to the person in the mush pot, but can I respond to somebody who's asked a question of the speaker?
You can in a speech. You cannot in a question. But you're welcome to make more than one speech if you're interested. And so I will be calling on further speeches in just a second here. Just to clarify a point of procedure, everybody is welcome to make speeches and comments that address things that have been said. But I prefer that they be done in the form of speeches themselves, and I prefer that questions be reserved for questions for speeches that have been made. Although that being said, you're welcome to, I suppose, ask a speaker in the circle about something that another speaker said. That's fine too. So just make sure to ask it in the form of a question. So, all right. So with that, and after having heard many questions that seem to me to be itching, budding speeches, I am looking for a speech in the negative on this resolution. Do we have someone who is willing to speak in the negative on this resolution? Yes, sir. You have 4 to 6 minutes.
A couple things right off is the crime bill, which I was referring to, the assault weapons ban in the 90s. After 10 years, when it sunsetted out, Congress had the ability to put it back in place. They did not, because the statistics that the FBI and other crime information gathering groups put together proved that there was no numerical difference between before and after. So literally, it had no effect on anything, except that it was difficult for those people that wanted AR-style rifles or similar things to be able to purchase them and use them for whatever reason. There are a lot of things a person can go over and talk about, and they've kind of been addressed somewhat. I'd like to read this whole thing, but I'm not going to. I want to hit some high points to kind of address some of the issues that have been addressed and referred to. The article starts out, the Washington, D.C. government recently uncovered a jarring truth about the city's violent crime problem. The bulk of such crime is perpetrated by a small, identifiable portion of the population. The policy implications of this fact are obvious. Rather than burden the law-abiding citizen with firearm restrictions and societal costs of violent crime, D.C. policymakers should work to vigorously prosecute and incapacitate the relatively small number of individuals terrorizing the city. There are many different areas that they go into here, but I wanted to cover a couple specifically. Let me see which city. In Washington, and addressing those most likely to be involved in gun crimes, the report noted, the small number of very high-risk individuals are identifiable. Their violence is predictable, and therefore it is preventable. There are at least 500 identifiable people who rise to this level of very high risk, and likely no more than 200 at any one given time. Those individuals comprise approximately 60 to 70% of all gun violence in the district. Your area. Further drilling down into the characteristics of those involved in gun crimes, the report made clear approximately 86% of homicide victims and suspects were known to the criminal justice system prior to the incident. Among all victims and suspects, about 46% have been previously incarcerated. The document also explained at least 23.3% of all homicides victims suspects were under active criminal justice system supervision, and the most victims and suspects with prior criminal offenses had been arrested about 11 times for about 13 different offenses at the time of the homicide. We go over into another area, going to Boston. In the mid-90s and 2000s, more than half of all murders, more than 3/4 of youth homicides, and 70% of all shootings were perpetrated by 1% of youth between the ages of 15 and 24. I guess I would close with this part, even though there was much more information in there, and talking about licensing or checking. How many of you people have filled out a 4473? How many of you know what a 4473 is? In order to purchase a firearm, you need to have to fill out a federal form 4473. On that form, they ask you all kinds of personal information, including one of the things that's currently on the ballot in South Dakota right now, or will be come election day, and that is dealing with use of marijuana. If you have a medical marijuana card, or if you are using marijuana or any other drugs, and you apply the negative on that 4473, you've just committed a federal felony. If you imbibe in those things after the 8th of November, if South Dakota passes that, if you are found with a firearm or ammunition, you can be federally arrested for violating federal law. So there are many things like that out there. The place for checking people out, the 4473 goes to Virginia originally, now it's moved a little bit, and they have on record anybody that has been criminally active. If you've ever had your fingerprints taken, they have access to all that information. And the problem with the background check information, if it's not accurate, is not because of what the feds have and what they don't want to use against us, it's because the local governments have not submitted the information to them. So there is many things in place to help prevent this stuff. I raised 4 kids in my house. My firearms were never in a safe. But they all knew how to operate them, how to work with them. Do I believe in safes? Absolutely. My firearms are now in a safe. But at the time, it wasn't something that I was concerned about. But because of break-ins and all the activities currently going on, it's more of a concern.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. Stay in the middle. We have time for questions for the speaker. Yes.
I'd like to thank the speaker for the speech, and I would like to know his feelings about red flag laws, which, you know, in almost all cases, these people that end up doing a school shooting are talking about it. They've been talking about it for a year. In the case of Uvalde, he was called a school shooter by his friends, and we have no legal recourse at this time for someone to respond. There's no way you can respond unless your state happens to have a red flag law. And so I would like to know what the speaker thinks about the possibility of having laws that permit people to bring to a judge's attention the fact that someone is acting erratically or that there's good reason to suspect that they may be seriously thinking about committing the school shootings. In most cases, they're talking about that well in advance.
Thank you. Please remain standing. Mr. Speaker, you can address that.
The red flag laws are another way for government to get access to our firearms for their purposes. We do not need red flag laws. Anybody that's in a school system and knows the students, the school has counselors. The teachers, the counselors are all required, as in the case of sexual misconduct by students or knowledge thereof, whether it be students or at home or whatever, are required to report that to the authorities. Most of these people that have been involved in all these issues that you folks are concerned with have been previously identified, as I read about the one instance in here. It's not that people don't know about it or haven't been told about it. It's that nobody will follow through and do something. They feel their hands are tied for some reason. They don't want the stigma, for lack of better terminology, of having this happen to them or somebody else. They don't want to be in court. Red flag laws are covered pretty good already in Davidson County. Personal knowledge of people that have had domestic issues, and the sheriff come and pick the firearms up and then return them later. So when the system works like it's supposed to, the community, which everybody's interested in, works like it's supposed to, most of these issues can be taken care of. It's not 100%, folks, and you all know that. We can't possibly make everybody safe.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. All right, we are getting close to the end of our allotted time this evening, but I want to go to at least 2 more speeches if possible. We're going to go to another speech in the affirmative. I would particularly smile upon one of the students giving a speech in the affirmative, should any of them be interested in sharing their views on this. Do we have one? Great, great, great. In that case, let us go to the speech in the affirmative, the lady in the black. Thank you, Madam Speaker. You have 4 to 6 minutes.
Okay, I'm just going to read what I wrote.
Feel free, yeah.
In my country of origin, the Philippine Islands, it was influenced by America during World War II, so that influence includes gun ownership. So compared to other countries in Asia, such as Japan, which nobody has guns, and South Korea, which has like a lot of limitations on gun ownership, we have a lot of our citizens own a lot of guns. I think it's like the Asian country that has probably the highest gun ownership. However, gun violence is completely unknown. We had an incident in 2013 where 8 people were killed in the Capitol, and it was a complete shock to the nation. This is something I'm just going to throw out, but perhaps, possibly, part of the reason for this is, unlike America, we don't really have a huge online or media culture where alleged criminals are given fame and kept in the spotlight for 24 hours on the news. Think of every time you turn on the TV, there's criminals who are given fame, and often America has a culture of glorifying these criminals and violence in general. Furthermore, there are stricter laws in getting a gun, but I think all of them are very, very reasonable. You have to get a license to possess a firearm, so you have to go through like a gun safety seminar. So a lot of people here are advocating for teaching more about gun safety. So you have to share a criminal record. If you have a history of gun violence and violence in general, you have to prove that you have no dealings with terrorist groups. We've already discussed how gun violence is literally just terrorism. And a drug test and pass a neuropsych evaluation. Then you'll be given a license. And even with the license, there's a 2-week waiting period until the firearm is ready to be possessed. This alone would mean that most handguns are out of reach for like students, so school shootings. And furthermore, schools are guarded, they have guards, and it's fenced, and you can't get in without an ID. So students are safe. There is no such thing as school shootings. But this, again, doesn't mean that Filipinos don't own guns. Asia, it's one of the Asian countries that have the highest possession of guns, but we do not have gun violence. And other countries like Switzerland have so many guns, almost literally everybody owns guns, but there are no gun violence. In conclusion, I think America could use at least some of these. It doesn't have to be all, but at least some of them, like a neuropsych evaluation, drug tests, and showing the criminal record. And overall, just more promotion of gun safety.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We have time for questions for the speaker. Do we have questions for the speaker? Questions for the speaker? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I am wondering if the speaker is aware of the fact that Japan has the highest suicide rate of any nation at 25 per 100,000, when she said they have almost zero gun ownership.
Thank you for that. Excellent question. Please stay standing. Madam Speaker.
Yes, I do know that. In fact, I study a lot about that. But I think that gun ownership really can affect suicide rates, just as one speaker said. But I think for Japan, this is a really different case, because Japan has a very, 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 I don't know if you know, they have a Japanese term that translated is salarymen, which basically everyone strives for this thing where every Japanese man has to have one job, and he's going to have that job until the day he dies. They also have a culture of you can't go home until the boss goes home first. So if you're going to work 12 hours, that means you're going to work 12 hours. And I think that's kind of a big thing. And honestly, I think if they had guns, the suicide rates would be higher. But I think for Japan in this case, it's really the cultural thing and like a cultural issue for Japan. So.
Thank you for that question, and thank you, Madam Speaker. And I particularly appreciate that exchange, because at a sociological level, Japan could probably be thought of as having been influenced by American culture as much as, or even more than, the Philippines in some ways. And the fact that there's very different kind of social environments there, and that shows up in ways that's just helpful for sociological thinking, such as what was brought up earlier. So thank you for that. We have time for more questions for the speaker. Do we have another question for the speaker? Another question for the speaker. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chair, I would simply like to ask if the speaker is aware of perceptions of suicide in Japan as being grounded in honor and a cultural history that supports that is not supported in the United States. So it's comparing two very different things.
Thank you, ma'am. Please stay standing, Madam Speaker.
So yeah, I do know about the culture of suicide being viewed as honorable. I think in the Philippines that isn't the case, so I think that affects things as well. In America, I noticed that people don't really talk about mental health that much. In Japan, I would say mental health is a very big taboo. So you're not, again, in Japan too, you're not going to talk about mental health. I'm sorry, I kind of forgot what she asked.
No, and you've addressed it. I simply wanted to know whether or not you knew the history of Japan's ideas regarding suicide, and that they're fundamentally different from those of America.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we have time for, I guess, one more question for the speaker. Do we have another question for the speaker? Well, we replace batteries in the other one. Yes, sir. Please. Yeah, actually, yes, this is a good idea. Okay. Address it to me.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I was curious, since you mentioned the Philippines, with how weak and how much we glorify violence in America, that stands in stark contrast to how the Philippines actually deal with criminals. As far as, the president that was nicknamed the Punisher, for 30,000 people dead, extrajudicial killings linked to the war on drugs. A lot of that same type of violence that is allowed to happen in the U.S. Just doesn't, because they're no longer alive to actually conduct the kind of violence that they conduct here. What is your thought on that?
Thank you, sir. Madam Speaker, you may address that however you like. And please stay standing, sir.
Yeah, that's President.
What do you think of Uncle Rod?
Oh my gosh. He's really insane. So he had these, like, if I'm not mistaken, he had these, he told the people if you killed a drug user, like, you'd be awarded money or something, and that increased violence. So I think also the politicians and who's in charge of the country affects violence in the country as well, because he's literally encouraging it. It's a good thing he's gone now, but Yeah, there were random people disappearing off the streets. I do remember that, and it was a very scary time. In fact, his whole career as a president and a politician was a very scary time for us. But I think something I want to bring up with Switzerland is they're very highly educated with gun safety, and I think in the Philippines, especially around the south area, it's called Mindanao, they are not as educated, and I think there's a lot of crime in that area because of low education, and in general, like, they don't have gun safety laws, and there were a lot of drug problems in Mindanao, and it's a thing in the Philippines. We all know that place is dangerous. So I think it would help to have more like education and also more sane presidents.
The chair smiles upon the notion of sane presidents for all countries in the world. Salamat kaibigan. With that, the speaker is thanked. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. So, all right, with that, we have time for one last speech in the negative on this resolution. I'm looking for a concluding speech in the negative on this resolution. Is anybody willing to give a final speech here? A final speech. Anybody willing to give a final speech in the negative? Yes, sir. Stand in the middle. You have 4 to 6 minutes. You don't have to take all of it if you don't want to, but you're welcome to take as much of it as you like.
I don't really have anything prepared because I didn't know what the format of this was going to be like. So I do have a couple of thoughts, though. One of them, I grew up in a family that did a lot of hunting and fishing. That was the culture of my family, so we had a lot of firearms in the home. Both my brother and I went through hunter safety training, and it's something I think all kids should go through. I think if they did that, they'd learn to respect firearms a lot better. So that's just my opinion. And when I was growing up, you know, as soon as my brother and I were old enough to go deer hunting, we went deer hunting with my dad. That was just something that was expected of us. And, you know, I was taught that, you know, the way you learn how to properly handle a firearm and shoot a firearm is by, you know, starting out with a single shot. You don't start out with a semi-automatic rifle. You learn how to aim and shoot, and you learn how to hit what you're aiming at. And you know that's what some people call gun control. And you learn, you know, not to point any firearm at anything you don't want to kill. And so I don't know where I'm going with that, but anyway, I think maybe if kids had more exposure at an early age to firearms, they might have more respect and realize, you know, with rights, there's great responsibility. And another thing I want to point out is I think part of the problem is the idea, it seems like there's a culture of absolutism that you can't put any rules or limits on purchasing firearms because it's a slippery slope. You start doing that and then they'll be taking away our firearms. And I don't think that that's really realistic. Just because we maybe implement a 2-week waiting period, I don't think necessarily that that means that everyone's firearms are going to be seized eventually. So I just think that, you know, with great rights, there's a lot of responsibility. We already have a precedence of banning certain types of firearms, or it's very, very controlled. You can't just go out and buy a fully automatic rifle. And that's not what an AR-15 clone is. But you know, there's a lot of hoops you have to go through, and you have to be licensed to do that. And it's not. I don't believe it's an easy thing to do. So, given that we do have some restrictions, and honestly, I don't think that an AR-15 clone is a good hunting rifle. I don't think you need that much rapid fire to go deer hunting. In fact, in most states, a .223 caliber AR-15 clone is not legal to go deer hunting. It's not big enough caliber. And so, in fact, there was a very famous outdoor writer by the name of Jack O'Connor, and he wrote the book on deer rifles, and he made a statement that he didn't see any need for any deer hunter to own an AR-15 clone or an AR-15. And he wrote the book on hunting. But when he made that statement, he never, he used to be he wrote a regular column for the Outdoor Life magazine. He was blackballed when he said that.
Mr. Speaker, you have a minute and a half.
So I think that's just a symptom of this black and white thinking. It's you either have to be all in or all against it. I think there's another way to look at things. You know, there's kind of a, you know, there's an in-between viewpoints. You know, so I don't think that you can't have any limits. I think that there should be limits, and you know, it's disappointing that so many people don't think that we can't have any limits at all. You know, you can't have permits, concealed carry permits. You know, I think there's a good reason for doing that.
And with that, the speaker is thanked. We have time for one question for the speaker, so stay in the middle. Do we have any question or clarification for the speaker? Any one question? Yes, sir.
Many ways to go, but you ended up with the perfect opening for him to answer for us would be talking about licensing or permitting. Are you fully aware that, is the speaker fully aware that it's almost impossible to get a concealed carry permit for the city of New York unless you are some high-end person with lots of millions to give to people?
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, you may address that however you like.
I would be surprised if that's the case.
And with that, the speaker and his questioner are thanked. And with that, all of the speakers are thanked. We've done several speeches here. It has been actually a broader debate than I even thought that it was going to be going into this, but we are out of time and have to do our debrief still. So I am going to ask if there is a motion to adjourn this debate. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Do we have a second to that motion? We have a second. With that, I call this debate adjourned. But don't go away. Stay sitting down. Now you don't have to refer to me as Mr. Chair, and now you don't have to refer to your fellow speakers in the third person. You can call them you, all you want. And we're going to go into the debrief session. So there's 2 questions for the debrief. Everybody's invited to give your thoughts on these 2 questions. Joel, if you don't mind passing the microphone around to people. The 2 questions are, what did you learn and what did you enjoy? What did you learn and what did you enjoy? Raise your hand and Joel will bring you the microphone. Just raise your hand if you learned or enjoyed anything. Right over here, sir, in the plaid.
This was indeed a most interesting discussion. And one of the things that I learned is, as you talked about gun possession in the Philippines, and there's not a lot of gun violence as such. But we also learned what kind of government you had as well. It's an interesting perspective that I learned. And I appreciate that very much. The other thing that I really appreciated was the wonderful discussion we had. Everyone has their thoughts, and that really made me feel good. In case you don't know me, J.P. Skelly, News Director, KOR and News Radio. Been doing it for 30-some-odd years. This is my kind of discussion. Usually the stuff that I cover, it gives me a headache. But I enjoyed this a lot, and I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having been here, Radio Man. Appreciate it a lot. Other folks, what did you learn? What did you enjoy? What did you learn? What did you enjoy? Yes, sir, here in the other plaid.
Yes. I know JP a long time, and we've been in lots and lots of meetings and whatnot else. Sometimes they get carried away. I like not being carried away. I like to have that energy. One thought that came to me, I'm not a hunter, not a shooter. My daughter was in Parkland area, and some of those were her students. Thought I could talk after that. Anyhow, I am for rights, especially the gun rights. The thing that I missed on this was more information, and the information I was looking at, and I would yield to Chuck here, how many people have been trained in gun work and had resultant gun problems?
Sir,
we should have that.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate, we're not in the debate, we're in the debrief. I appreciate was there anything else that you enjoyed, though?
No, I thought everybody looks great.
You look great, too, and thank you for having been here for this. Anybody else? What did you learn? What did you enjoy? Including people who didn't speak as well, too. Anybody, what did you learn? What did you enjoy? Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'll address you, but I'll also address the members of the room. So I learned today that my understanding of the passion of hunters is their passion. And I come from the United States and I come from South Dakota, but I've lived many years in Australia, 40 years plus. And I think that the sadness and the thing that I've learned is that the majority of the people fail to address the elephant in the room, which isn't gun control, which isn't the Second Amendment, which we missed a lot of, but it...
Ma'am, again,
I got it.
Thank you.
However, I also enjoyed the debate a lot.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for having been in it. So. I'm sorry, everybody. Well, there can be more debates on this. The only barrier to there being another debate is whether you guys are willing to put it on. And if you guys are willing to put it on, we will send somebody out here to chair another debate with you guys on the same subject if you like. So I'm sorry, I just have to maintain the procedure and keep it in the debrief, not the debate. I'm sorry about that. Anybody else? What did you learn? What did you enjoy? Yes, sir, right over here. Yeah.
I thoroughly appreciated the young lady from the Philippines and her different viewpoints and the facts she brought to the table. Having been to Switzerland and seen 15-year-old boys riding down the street with an assault rifle, they're on their bicycle riding down the street with an assault rifle. That was mind-boggling to me. I appreciate you bringing that up.
Thank you, sir. Just a reminder to everybody, please, 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 we're in the debrief, not the debate. So, yeah. Anybody else? What did you learn? What did you enjoy? Joel. What did you learn and what did you enjoy?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot.
Thank you for having
the thing that I think
debate.
is great about a debate like this is that it's easy to perceive people on the other side as being more extreme than they actually are, and when you hear them explain their position, even though you still disagree with it, you can often appreciate it on a different level because it's not as extreme, and their reasons for holding it are just as laudable as your own reasons for holding your own beliefs. And so the appreciation for the other side as people with reasonable forms of thinking just like your own, even though you come to a different spot. So,
something I enjoyed a lot about this was that there was actually a very, very big difference in opinions and difference in viewpoints in this room. And I had actually kind of come in kind of assuming, well, it will be another one of these debates where we wind up having different shades of people agreeing with one side of the resolution or disagreeing with one side of the resolution, nitpicking stuff. But it wasn't that. Actually, I think you could probably come out of this debate thinking that there really is a huge, wide array of different opinions on viewpoints here in Mitchell, South Dakota, on this, and I just appreciate having heard some very good arguments and some very good-natured, good faith understandings from a bunch of people from at least 8 different walks of life and many more from the questions and comments. So, over here. What did you learn? What did you enjoy?
I learned that there's a lot of other learning around correlation and causation that it made me curious about tonight. Some things came up that just made me wonder and wanted to learn more in that way. And I appreciate, you kind of stole mine in terms of appreciating the diversity of thought, and yet knowing, I mean, I don't know that we all live in Mitchell, but we're all from this area, and oftentimes, again, you'd think would be lumped up in similar. And so to hear the diversity of thought within this room, and yet knowing we share our common roots and common place here and love for this area, I just think that's a rich snapshot of our country.
Thank you for having me in here. Yes, and we'll do this as the last one, and then we'll finish up here. So, what did you learn? What did you enjoy?
I'm not going to point to anything in particular I learned, just a lot of interesting factoids that I didn't know before. I guess the thing I appreciated was several times when people acknowledged, even if there is a problem and we want to do something about it, we don't necessarily know what to do about it, and we're acknowledging that there probably isn't one thing that would solve the problem anyway. So, I mean, I think it is a topic we could have another discussion on and still learn a lot more about.
Well, may those discussions happen, and I will look forward to hearing how it goes with you guys all here in Mitchell, South Dakota. So, thank you everybody for having participated in this. Thank you for everybody who spoke and who asked questions, and also for those of you who didn't speak but were in here, providing by your presence and by your quiet engagement part of the public discourse process that is often forgotten. I found that this debate was very wholesome and educational in some ways, and I appreciate you guys having been here with us through that. So let me just say a little bit about the organization I work for and some of the things that we'll be doing with the McGovern Center in the coming months and years. Braver Angels, again, is the country's largest grassroots-led, fully red-blue organization working to bring Americans together across all of their divides, but most importantly the red-blue divide. And we do that in a couple of different ways. One of the ways we do it most is through Braver Angels debates like this, in college campuses around the country, in our local chapters around the country, doing it with Rotary clubs and church groups. We also do these online over Zoom in the exact same format, just modified for Zoom purposes comparatively frequently. And we do this sort of debate on every array of issues you can think of. We don't just do debates. We also do more classic family therapy style workshops. We have the red-blue workshop, we have the depolarizing within workshop, we have families and politics workshops, we have one-on-one conversations workshops. We have a whole variety of different offerings like that meant to help people better understand their feelings about themselves and why they feel polarized, and how they can get to better understandings of each other and maybe be a little bit more charitable to themselves and to others in this American political process. Aside from that, we do a lot of media outreach as well. My dear friend John Wood Jr. runs the Braver Angels podcast these days, and he does a lot of our intellectual engagement with folks whose podcasts and television shows you guys have probably heard of as well too. So what is our overall mission? I like to analogize us to, in some sense, what 12-step groups do. We acknowledge we're polarized. We acknowledge that our fellow Americans are polarized, but at the end of the day, the only people who we can actually fix on that are ourselves. If we can come to the habits and the understandings of ourselves and hold ourselves to that and hold each other to that, then we can live a different way of life in public discourse and in thinking about politics. Maybe, just maybe, other people will see that and be inspired to come to a certain understanding of that as well with us. That's just fine in peacetime. That's just fine in times when politics is nasty and angry but not particularly chaotic. That is something else entirely when we live through the many apocalypses and great world-shattering moments of the sorts that we seem to be finding happening on the domestic home front again and again and again here in America. And we all lived through the long year 2020. We all lived through the pandemic. We all lived through the things that happened with the election. And I want to tell all of you that Braver Angels did the exact same thing in every moment there, on every issue there that you did here. We don't take policy positions. We don't endorse candidates. We don't endorse any kind of politics other than being good to your fellow citizens, and that's all we will ever do, because whatever happens, who gets elected, what the policies being proposed are, what the ways of life that are engaging each other are, we really strongly believe that there's other people who can figure out what the right policies are. There's other people who can figure out how to govern us. But what we need to do, and what we strive to help our fellow Americans do, is live a politics where some people will win and some people will lose, but we have to be a country on the other side of it, regardless of what the political end state is there. And so if you are interested in doing that, which, by the way, that's not a total politics. You have your own ideas, your own policy favorite ideas, your own parties that you affiliate with, your own politicians you follow, and whatever those are, whatever kind of political thinker you are welcome in Braver Angels. You are needed in Braver Angels, because if we don't represent our fellow Americans, and if we don't bring everybody in to this work of holding ourselves to depolarizing political discourse, we are not doing anything. And so whatever your politics are, you are welcome in what we do. So as we approach the 2022 elections, which will be hitting all of you guys here in South Dakota in just a few short weeks, and all of us around the country too, and as we approach the next most polarizing election in American history after the last 2 or 3, and as we go forward into all the years, all the elections, all the decades ahead, Braver Angels is committed to helping Americans find the good in each other and live a little bit more of that Frederick Jackson Turner, Alexis de Tocqueville dream of free citizens coming to higher understandings of themselves through political community with each other, and we are committed to doing that more and more with all of our fellow Americans. So from our community to yours, we invite you to join us if you should be so interested. But we appreciate you having gotten a taste of it here and having helped us continue to prove that a free people can govern themselves in good faith and come to a higher understanding of democracy in America. So, so with that, don't clap for me, don't clap for us. Give yourselves a round of applause for having been a part of that. And Joel, thank you for having been our great partners. We will look forward to the next Braver Angels debate we do here, and I would like to get off the stage and invite you to tell everybody what the McGovern Center is doing moving forward.
You're on stage.
Well, thank you for coming, everybody. I just appreciate your being here, and we're going to, as we look forward to the future, have a regular series of debates like this. We will be communicating that out and picking, and we'd love any feedback on topics that you feel like would be good topics for conversation, for discussion. But thank you for coming this evening, and I appreciate your willingness to mix it up and to listen to each other and learn from each other as we have been able to do this evening. So thank you. So good night.
Awesome. Good.
Good. Thank you for coming.
Nice.